Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Russia claims to have shot down Ukrainian drones over the Black Sea just hours after agreeing to a naval ceasefire. Russia also launches drone attacks on a Ukrainian port city as Kiev and Moscow dispute ceasefire details. US President Donald Trump and his chiefs downplay a security breach involving a journalist added to a Signal group chat containing top security officials. The chat contains official plans for strikes on Yemen and highly sensitive material. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz takes responsibility for the leak. Wildfires ravage southern South Korea, killing 24 people and forcing 27,000 to evacuate. A firefighting helicopter crashes, killing the pilot as officials race to control the flames. Nightly protests continue nationwide in Turkey after the jailing of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. Authorities have arrested over 1,400 people, including students, journalists and lawyers. President Donald Trump signs an executive order overhauling the US federal election system, requiring proof of citizenship for voter registration and mandating all ballots be received by election day. Experts warn the move could disenfranchise millions without easy access to the required documents. India is accused of meddling in Canada's 2022 Conservative Party leadership race. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre asserts he won the leadership fair and square. Bangladesh leader Muhammad Yunus flies to Beijing for his first state visit amid frosty relations with neighbouring India. The 84-year-old will meet President Xi Jinping on Friday before returning on Saturday after several high-level meetings. A US intelligence report identifies China as the greatest military and cyber threat to the United States. The report also notes China's enhancement of military capabilities for a potential Taiwan conflict and its aim to lead artificial intelligence by 2030. Starting off now, a Russian court has sentenced a group of captured Ukrainians, including soldiers and ex-soldiers, with prison terms of up to 23 years on terrorism and other charges. On the other hand, Russia's defense ministry reported destroying 9 Ukrainian drones overnight, including 2 over the Black Sea. This comes just hours after the US brokered a ceasefire agreement between Moscow and Kiev to halt Black Sea attacks. No details were provided on whether the drones targeted Black Sea assets. Meanwhile, Ukraine's Air Force stated it had downed 56 out of 117 Russian drones launched overnight. Additionally, 48 drones were lost due to electronic warfare interference by Ukrainian forces. The latest escalation raises concerns over the fragility of the ceasefire, with both sides continuing aerial operations. Ukrainian officials warned that Russian drones and missile attacks could intensify despite diplomatic efforts. Moscow has not commented on whether its operations will be scaled back. Continuing with this, the United Nations has welcomed the US-brokered Black Sea Agreement between Russia and Ukraine, with a spokesperson highlighting ongoing efforts to safeguard freedom of navigation. This is what he said.
We've seen the two announcements, which are obviously which are welcome. These issues, notably on the freedom of navigation and Black Sea, are issues that the Secretary General, his team, and notably Rebecca Greenspan and others, have been working on since almost the start of this, the conflict, and there continues to be discussions on the.
The UK government has responded with cautious optimism, saying they are closely monitoring developments. However, the Kremlin insists that safe passage will only be ensured if sanctions on Russian Agricultural Bank and other banks involved in food trade are lifted. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has accused Moscow of lying about the deal's conditions, dismissing claims that the ceasefire is linked to sanctions. He urged the world to hold Russia accountable for its actions. We are now joined by Joshua Barnes, correspondent and anchor for NewsX World, to discuss this further. Joshua, this is obviously a development in the ceasefire negotiations that have been ongoing now for weeks. How significant is it as a development, and is this going to stop any violence in this fighting between Russia and Ukraine?
Yes, Tom. Well, what we've seen is we have seen talks and we have seen progress. Of course, the US brokering talks with both Russia and Ukraine separately, held in Riyadh in recent days. Now, we must remember we are at the start of these negotiations. Fighting has been ongoing for over 3 years, and no ceasefire is ending direct fighting. The ceasefire that we've seen, of course, is looking at the Black Sea and making sure Black Sea shipping can continue. But the ramifications of what we've seen in the last sort of 12 hours or so with these strikes will throw a spanner in the works, despite the widespread global support for this move. Now, strikes coming, or drones coming from Ukraine that were, of course, shot down by Russia, according to their defense ministry, over the Black Sea. We're not sure whether these were actually going to target anyone in the Black Sea or any shipping or any military bases along the coastline, but they were, of course, shot down. There's potential that they were going further into Russia. But I think this just signals the fragility of any deal that has been made. You mentioned there already, there are, of course, arguments and disagreements over what this ceasefire deal actually entails. We don't know specifically a start date. What we've seen in other conflicts across the world, like the war in Gaza between Israel and Hamas, there have been definitive dates and definitive laws set out around these ceasefire deals. There seems to be some ambiguity in what we're seeing currently in the deal that's been brokered by the US, and it seems that the deals are also separate, although the overriding theme is, of course, a ceasefire in the Black Sea region. But Russia, as you mentioned already, of course, have said that they're not going to follow it through until certain conditions that they want, restrictions and sanctions placed on their agriculture and wider Russia, they want to see, of course, lifted. But this is one that we will, of course, keep an eye on. There is positivity in the movement forward of negotiations and talks, but of course, the underlying threat is still there with the war raging on between both nations.
Given the distrust between both sides, obviously both of these deals were brokered in separate rooms, mediated by the USA. How do we see these developing, and what is the significance of this deal in particular?
Well, looking first at the talks being separate, I think we're in a position where at the moment the countries can't go down and sit together. The US, of course, are making sure that these talks are happening, but currently there's so much divide between the two nations. There's so much anger and almost hatred in relation to the strikes that we've seen, civilian strikes, and of course energy infrastructure as well being targeted on both sides. I think the next step for any meaningful ceasefire conversation will need to be with every party in the room, whether that's just the US, Ukraine and Russia, or whether Europe are a part of it. We know Russia, of course, are very keen to keep European allied nations away from any of these discussions. But moving forward, I think those conversations do need to take place. In terms of this specific ceasefire and what we might see moving forward, I think there will be more clarity on the exact specifics of the ceasefire deal. We haven't had that yet. The US haven't commented. Russia and Ukraine, of course, have made statements on the other side, not following through with what they thought. But ultimately, in the public domain, we're not certain and we're not 100% clear exactly what it entails. So conversations will continue. We'll have a bit of toing and froing where each country blames the other for strikes and action, and like Zelensky calling Russia almost liars in essence with what they've done, and saying that we can't trust what Russia are saying. However, this will continue to rumble on, and I think we will continue to make progress as long as both sides can sit down together for these discussions.
Joshua Barnes, thank you very much. You are staying with us. We move on now. Amid the raging wildfires in South Korea, a helicopter fighting deadly wildfires has crashed, killing the pilot. So far, at least 24 people have been killed in one of South Korea's worst wildfire outbreaks, with multiple raging blazes causing unprecedented damage. More than a dozen fires broke out over the weekend, scorching wide swathes of the southeast, forcing around 27,000 people to urgently evacuate, with the fire cutting off roads and downing communications lines as residents fled in panic. Overnight, the death toll jumped as wind-driven flames tore through neighborhoods and razed an ancient temple. According to the Interior Ministry, the wildfires have charred over 17,000 hectares, with the blaze in Oisong County alone accounting for 87% of the total. The government has raised the crisis alert to its highest level and taken the rare step of transferring thousands of prisoners in the city of Andong. Some evacuees sheltering in an elementary school gym said they had to flee so quickly they could bring nothing with them. Meanwhile, South Korea's Prime Minister and acting President Han Duck-soo has vowed to deploy all resources to fight the wildfires. Let's listen to what he had to say.
역대 최악의 산불 기록을 갈아쓰고 있습니다. 산불 진화 과정에서 유명을 달리하신 4분을 포함하여 현재 기준 총 18분이 목숨을 잃고 주민 2만 3천여 명이 긴급 대피하였습니다.
We have some breaking news coming in now, where China's foreign ministry has urged the United States to stop thinking of China through its own hegemonic mentality in response to the US calling China the top military cyber threat. Let's in fact listen to what he had to say.
不要用自身的霸权逻辑来镜像中国，不要用过时的冷战思维来看待中美关系。 不要以战略竞争为名行对华遏制打压之实，停止以任何方式纵容支持台独分裂活动，停止渲染中国威胁，以实际行动推动中美关系稳定、健康。
We now move to some news from the United States, where President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to overhaul US elections. Key changes include requiring documentary proof of citizenship for voter registering and barring non-citizens from making political donations. The order emphasises uniformity in election practices, referencing voter ID systems in India and Brazil as models, as calls for federal agencies like Homeland Security to review state voter records for non-citizens. It also mandates that votes must be cast and received by election day, ending the acceptance of late mail-in ballots. Additionally, the order prohibits foreign nationals from contributing to US elections and bans reliance on barcodes or QR codes for vote counting. The Election Assistance Commission will review and possibly recertify voting systems within 6 months. We are joined once again to discuss this by Joshua Barnes, correspondent and anchor for NewsX World. Thank you very much for joining us once again, Joshua. Joshua, why should the average American citizen care about this so much? Who is Trump targeting in this executive order?
Well, yes, we're looking at Donald Trump making some changes, significant changes to the electoral voting system within the United States. It's something, of course, he has been very clear on. His consistent claims of election fraud from the 2020 US election, in which he lost, has really spurred this move forward from him. Now, he's looking, one, at making sure that only the citizens of the United States are voting, but there are, of course, advocates and voting advocates who disagree with this. Now, we need to look at the wider picture of voting within America. A lot of states have their own separate rules for voting. So what Trump's trying to do is put these measures in across the board so that there is clarity, it's more simple, but also that in his mind, people who aren't citizens of the United States can't vote. But these advocates are saying that a lot of the systems that are being used, which store the data and the information for voters, are outdated, meaning that some people might be wrongly labelled as non-citizens despite being citizens of the United States, and therefore their vote wouldn't count. Now, who are we looking at who are potentially in that bracket? We're looking at potentially people who have moved into the States from other countries, legally, potentially now citizens of the United States. But there is, of course, an agenda here, Trump looking at migration as well. Not that the two are directly linked, but that's probably the proportion and the demographic that will be mostly hit by these changes. Now, also you mentioned there the change in these mail-in ballots, and this is something that of course was raised in his 2020 election claims that there was election fraud. He said that mail-in ballots were dumped and that Democrats were dumping Republican ballots, and that he would have of course won the election as opposed to Joe Biden. However, we now are seeing a shift where mail-in ballots will have to come in before the end of the election day and be counted. This of course marks a massive shift compared to some previous states which allowed them to come in later. Mail-in ballots also people who weren't present for the election and weren't able to head to a poll or submit their ballot in another way. And there will be some ramifications for states that don't follow these rules. We're looking at federal fines and cutting of funds. So these are drastic changes, sweeping changes, continuing Trump's agenda, and it's something that he's promised. He's promised to step up on elections and make sure that these rules are in place. But the ramifications are going to be there potentially before the midterms that we see in 2026. Trump, as we know, has 2 years between now and those midterm elections to really do pretty much what he can, and then the country will vote once again. So for him, these are going to be in place. Whether it will strengthen his position in those elections, we'll have to wait and see, but the ramifications, of course, will be there.
Joshua, the United States is obviously a democracy. The president can sign these executive orders, but he is checked and balanced by other branches of government. What challenges is Donald Trump going to face in introducing this executive order? What hurdles is he going to have to jump over?
Well, yes, of course, any executive order has to go through the jurisdiction, has to go through the Senate, has to be passed off by lawmakers. But ultimately, with this decision here, I don't know if he's going to face too many challenges. We know, of course, that Trump controls politics in the United States, winning the House of Representatives, winning the Senate, and also winning the presidency as well. So for him, it's easier to get these executive orders through, but there of course will be challenges, and challenges from different groups. We've seen it elsewhere with cuts to the federal government. We've seen legal challenges coming in, and we've seen judges upholding these legal challenges and putting pauses on executive orders and actions. So this is something that I expect we will see. There are of course groups that are in staunch opposition to this move from Donald Trump. Though it's not as divisive as a topic, because of course elections are something which have to happen every 4 years, and midterm elections also in between that. So it's not as divisive as what we've seen with immigration and job cuts, other things that have been challenged in the courts, but I'm sure there will be some legal action from advocacy groups that of course Trump will have to circumnavigate.
Joshua, thank you very much for joining us. We now move to some more US news. Amid the brewing controversy over a Signal chat leak of Trump's officials, Mike Waltz claims full responsibility for the group chat of senior administration officials. Waltz's comments came 1 day after Jeffrey Goldberg, editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, revealed that he was added to a group on Signal, a private messaging app. Goldberg's account in The Atlantic suggested that Waltz had mistakenly invited him to the chat. The prominent journalist remained in the group undetected as the president's cabinet members discussed policy and coordinated a wave of bombings, an extraordinary breach that critics said put national security at risk. While Mike took complete responsibility of the leak in an interview with the Fox News, he also denied being in contact with Goldberg. Let's in fact listen to what Waltz had to say.
It's embarrassing,
Right.
yes. We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened. But I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone. Look, I take full responsibility. I built the group. My job is to make sure everything's.
Meanwhile, President Trump has said Waltz does not need to apologize for it and that his administration is looking into the matter. Let's take a listen in.
No, I don't think he should apologize. I think he's doing his best. It's equipment and technology that's not perfect, and probably he won't be using it again.
National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard and CIA Director John Ratcliffe denied at a Senate hearing that any classified information was shared in the message chain. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth also faced scrutiny for the messages, though he did not testify. Democrats on the panel rebuked the cabinet members as incompetent with national security. Democrats in the US House of Representatives are slamming the Trump administration over a security breach. Democratic Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill says this mistake put lives in danger. She made the remarks during a news conference at the Capitol in Washington. Let's take a listen to what Mikey Sherrill and Tulsi Gabbard had to say.
There was no classified material that was shared in that.
So then if there was no classified material, share it with the committee. You can't have it both ways. These are important jobs. This is our national security.
Senator, I have the same answer. I have not participated in any Signal group chat or any other chat on another app that contained any classified.
This put lives in danger. An investigation needs to take place. That is what we are calling for. And I think the House Armed Services Committee needs to hold hearings on this and get to the bottom of it so no more service members are put.
We move now to the developing situation in Turkey, where almost 1,500 people have been detained as tens of thousands continued protesting in the Turkish capital after the arrest of the main political rival of President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. This is the biggest protest in Turkey in over a decade that erupted last week following the arrest of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu on corruption charges, a move opposition supporters see as a blatant violation of the rule of law. The leader of Turkey's opposition, Republican People's Party, called for a mass rally and demanded for open trials and early elections. In fact, let's see what he said.
Cumartesi günü İstanbul'un bir büyük meydanında Ekrem İmamoğlu'na sahip çıkmak için Ekrem İmamoğlu'nun tutukluluğuna, belediye başkanlarımızın her birinin tutukluluğuna itiraz etmek için şeffaf, açık, canlı yayında yargılamalar talep etmek için artık canımıza tak etti. Erken seçim istiyoruz demek için bir büyük mitinge var mısın?
Authorities have hit back with a crackdown that has alarmed rights groups, with 7 journalists who covered the protest remanded in custody by an Istanbul court. While speaking on the unfolding tensions in Turkey, here's what the President of Turkey has said about the issue.
Sokaklarda terör estirenlerin, bu ülkeyi yangın yerine çevirmek isteyenlerin varacağı hiçbir menzil yoktur. Girdikleri yol çıkmaz sokaktır.
Moving on now, India has been accused of meddling in Canada's Conservative Party leadership race. There has been allegations that Indian agents were involved in fundraising and organising within the South Asian community to support Pierre Poilievre in 2022. Poilievre, who won 68% of the vote, insists that he secured victory fair and square. The Canadian intelligence found no evidence that interference influenced the outcome. The allegations surfaced just as Canada's general election campaign gained momentum. Liberal leader Mark Carney criticised Poilievre for refusing a security clearance, calling it irresponsible. Poilievre now argues that the process is politicised and would restrict him from speaking publicly on key issues. This was after a public inquiry previously found that both India and China attempted to interfere in past elections, though with minimal impact. Intelligence officials warn foreign agents from China, Russia and India could target diaspora communities through disinformation campaigns ahead of the April 28th election. India has repeatedly denied all interference claims. We now move over to Israel, where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke by phone with the mother of hostage Elkanah Bobot after she criticised the government for not contacting her family. Bobot's two brothers also joined the conversation. Ruhama Bobot, Elkanah's mother, said the family had not heard from any officials, including Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer or Prime Minister's office. She added that the only communication has come from IDF liaison officers. This comes after Hamas released a propaganda video showing Elkanah Bobot and another hostage, Youssef Haim Ohana, both kidnapped on October the 7th from the Nova Music Festival. Ruhama, the hostage's mother, expressed shock at seeing Elkanah in such a depleted state, expressing concern for his health as he suffers from asthma. India is on track to surpass Japan's GDP by 2025 and Germany's by 2026, according to the latest IMF data. India's economy has doubled in the last decade, growing from $2.1 trillion in 2015 to $4.3 trillion in 2025, marking it the fifth largest economy in the world. Japan's GDP currently stands at $4.4 trillion, while Germany's is at $4.9 trillion. If the current growth rate continues, India will become the third largest economy by 2026, behind only the United States at almost $27 trillion and China at $17.7 trillion. India's inflation is projected to remain at 4.1%, with February's rate dropping to 3.61%. India's government stands at 82.6% of GDP, significantly lower than the US national debt of $36.22 trillion. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal hailed this growth as outstanding, crediting Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership. China has sentenced Taiwan-based publisher Li Yan to 3 years in prison for inciting secession. This has been confirmed by Beijing's Taiwan Affairs Office today. Li, who is the editor-in-chief of Gusa Publishing, disappeared during a visit to the mainland China in 2023 before authorities revealed he was under investigation for national security crimes. When tried in Shanghai in February, Li pleaded guilty and did not appeal. Li had published books critical of China's Communist Party, including works on alleged repression in Xinjiang. His sentencing comes as Beijing increases pressure on Taiwan, which it claims as its territory. This month, Taiwanese President Lee Cheng-te called China a foreign hostile force and pushed measures against Chinese espionage. On Wednesday, Beijing also launched an important portal for reporting Taiwan independence thugs. Meanwhile, Taiwan deported Chinese influencer Liu Jiana after she promoted unification by force. She had lived on the island for over a decade before leaving on Tuesday. Pakistan and China are still working on security measures to protect Chinese nationals in the South Asian country. That's according to Islamabad's ambassador to Beijing. Chinese workers have been targeted by separatist terrorists. The attackers accuse Beijing of helping Pakistan exploit minerals in Balochistan. The southwestern province is home to China's strategic port and mining projects. Pakistan's ambassador Khalil Hashmi spoke at Bio Forum in China's Hanning province. He said ensuring the safety of Chinese citizens is Pakistan's national responsibility. He said that the country is doing everything possible to protect them. Hashmi said Pakistan and China are working closely on security. He highlighted the cooperation on information sharing and security procedures. He called it a work in progress, and China said regularly updated on Pakistan's steps. China has been urging Pakistan to allow its security personnel to protect its citizens. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from across the world.